Well, I am back again for what is this? Part four. Part four about this guy who shouldn't be building a shower. And again, I preface what I said on each and every video, including the first one. There's three videos, by the way. If you haven't watched all three of them, you can go back on my channel and watch number one, number two, number three. I don't have them named, but they are my last three videos. So pretty easy to find. So I prefaced on those videos, especially the first one, that I'm not here to like degrade this guy or to call him out. Well, I am calling him out, but to call him names or do anything to, I don't know him, to disparage his character or anything. I don't know him, to be fair. The problem that I have, and I'm going to preface what I've said on other videos because some of you guys have only seen this one video. The problem that I have is that he has a very, very large following on YouTube, 1.8 million subscribers, 1.8 in only like 3 or 4 years, which is crazy to me because I've been on YouTube now for 14 years. 14 years. I don't have one even near that, not even anything near that, which the jealousy thing kicks in because I know what I'm doing in tile and bathroom renovation and building a shower and all that stuff, and he doesn't. So it concerns me that he has such a large following and makes mistakes. And whether he makes them on purpose, which I titled kind of the last video, that I think this guy is doing this mistake thing on purpose so he could self-correct and then give himself, a little big up for correcting himself. But he does it on the next video. So he'll let that video stand alone that he made the mistakes on for 2 or 3 weeks or a month. And then he does, oh, and by the way, on my last video, you guys corrected me on ABC. But if the common guy, the homeowner, the DIYer saw that video where he's building the shower pan, which is the first video, first and second video, and they make the mistakes that he did, they've got a failure. So my angst with him is, or pushback with him is that he's showing the wrong way. I don't care if you corrected yourself or not. You did it too late. You should have self-corrected along the way. I actually edit out all of my mistakes. So to be fair, I want people to focus in on the exact way to do things, the way that I do them. I don't want them to later on find out I did it wrong, or even self-correct on a video and then, it's a 20-minute video and then, okay, I need to know what I needed to know at 10 minutes, but then at 15 minutes, I corrected myself. That's not right because they went away. Anyway, that being said, I'm going to get on to the tiling now. The tiling part that he did, I'm going to say there's not a whole lot of critique. There's a couple little tricks or little things that I have to say about some of the things that he does on here. It's really hard not to go on YouTube and find a boatload of videos on how to tile, a boatload. So this is arguably less important than the former rather, because the build process matters mostly. The tiling process kind of sort of matters. So some of the stuff you're going to see, I'm going to nitpick it a little bit, not a whole lot, but I want you to see that there are some things that he misses a boat on. Let's put it that way. So without further ado, as I always do, I talk too much and I'm going to let this thing roll.
Hey everybody, my name is Mike Montgomery and today I've got a fun video. We are tiling the floor of our custom shower. I recently saw this YouTube short or TikTok that highlighted a cool way of making a template using wooden sticks like these. I used my table saw to rip a 2x4 into 1/8 inch thick strips, but you could also use yardsticks like these from Lowe's or Home Depot. The idea is to hot glue these strips of wood around the perimeter of your shower walls to mark their exact shape. I'm also marking the location of the drain with this template, which I think should help considering it's off center a little bit. And now we can take this to our tile. The tile that I'm using is this pebble or stone mosaic. I like it a lot. I'll leave a link to it down in the description, along with all of the other tools, materials, and supplies I used. After I got all of my...
Okay, a couple of things I want to talk about here real quick. This mosaic tile, he has shaved stone, and there's some of it that is really literally stone that's all glued together on this mesh. And so when you take these out and you put them together, you want to be very careful not to show any lines. And he did a good job. As you saw, he was twisting the tile around, from left to right. And he's like, oh, that's a good fit, but this is a better one. And that's what you need to do with these type of tile. Make sure that your lines in between all of your sets of tile don't show, because that's the worst thing about these mosaic patterns is they're not always, there will be 4 sides you can fit together. and sometimes only 3 of them, well, sorry, only 1 of them will work really, really good. The other 3 suck because you'll see, like, see that far right tile at the bottom, and see the one next to it on the left? Those are the lines you're trying to avoid, because when you put grout in there, especially if it's a contrasting grout, those lines will pop. Second thing I want to talk about is his idea of doing a template on top of the tile. Great idea. I don't do it because it's a lot of work for really no return. It's just easier for me to get some 1x, and I'll get, like, whatever my measurement is, and I'll put a 1x, straight edge, if you will, any long 8-foot straight edge, and I just put it up against the edge of where the tile is at. That's basically the same way he's going to do. But I just kind of find this a little bit of a waste of time. Back in the day, 20 years ago, 22 years ago, I would cut out cardboard and tape all the cardboard together and then cut off the excess to match up the tile. But this is a good little trick. I don't have a problem with it.
Pieces laid out, I then put my template on top and I used a permanent marker to mark the outline, along with the drain. To get the look I'm going for, I'm not using any spacers between my tile sheets, but if you're gonna use some, make sure they're installed during this step. And now it's time to cut our first piece. And there's a lot of different ways to cut tile, but for the majority of these pieces, I'll be using my tile saw with a sliding table. Whenever you're cutting mosaic tiles or any small pieces, you want to make sure that the bottom is supported, otherwise it can be a little wobbly like what you can see on that corner piece. I just wanted to show you that for demonstration, but on future cuts, I'll be using a backer board for support. You'll see. And now that these stones are wet, you can see some of that color really start to pop. That's awesome. These next 2 pieces just need 1 edge cut, and I'm using some cement board as basically a zero clearance in.
And now he calls it cement board. If you watch the other videos that I did, I kind of gave him a hard time, the last video specifically, because he was calling it fiber board, and it's not, cement board. So thank you for calling it cement board.
Insert like on a table saw. This material is no problem for the diamond disc to cut, and now all the tile underneath are supported, even the small pieces on the edges.
So that was a very important trick. That he used backer board to support a mosaic is a great idea. Foam board, if it's stiff enough, it'll work too. Actually, anything that you have that's stiffer than, say, cardboard, you wouldn't want to use cardboard. I generally will use, if I have extra sheetrock, because I'm doing a bathroom renovation, I'll use sheetrock, and I'll ruin the sheetrock, but it doesn't matter because you're ruining the backer board. So, 5 to 1 or 6 to 1, half dozen the other.
So far so good, and now for this last piece, we just need a little bit of this corner to fill out the end. And this cut really wouldn't be doable if I wasn't using that cement board as a backer piece. Another huge upside that you get from having this backer board is a reference line for lining up your mosaic tile. This is really convenient, especially on these kind of free-form cuts where we're not referencing a straight edge. So now I'm starting to see the perimeter come together, it's looking nice, and I repeated those same steps to the edge pieces on the other side. And looking back on this footage, I didn't need to keep track of these tiny stones on the edge. The wall tiles are going to be covering that.
Exactly.
Using a backer board helps a ton for corner pieces like what I've got on this piece. There's a couple of intersections on some small stones, and I'm able to just cut 1 piece and then spin it, and I know that I'm right on the line that I want to cut. Plus, everything's supported like I've mentioned already. Now, it is not necessary to have a fancy tile saw like what I'm using. Especially for a small job like this, it'd be easy to get by with a diamond blade on an angle grinder.
Yes and no. Yes and no. As many of you know, I have a long history in Jamaica and a couple other third world countries, and I see them do better with less. And an angle grinder would be a #1 tool that they would use, right? Because that's all they can afford. Well, actually, a manual tile cutter, which they can do a lot more tricks than we've been able to accomplish with a manual, slide type of tile cutter. And an angle grinder, if you could afford one, would be the next step up. And a wet saw, you're just not seeing them very often because they are kind of price prohibitive. An angle grinder, especially on a tiny mosaic, even on a backer board, I would not. No. If you're gonna, so what he's saying basically, yeah, if all you're doing is the floor, possibly you could get by with angle grinder. But he's got all these large format tile and all. No. Rent a tile saw. If you can't afford to buy one, just, $40 a day at Home Depot and rent one. It will save you a lot of heartache. Angle grinder is the last thing that, specifically I would. He's saying you don't need a wet saw, and I'm saying yes, you do.
Just make sure you mask up because it is dusty. Honestly,
Dusty.
for a small job like this shower floor, a diamond disc is perfect for the whole job. So don't think
No.
it's necessary to spend a ton on a tile saw.
No, not
You can see
spend.
though I cracked this small stone, so be careful, but I'll be able to replace that. Now I'll double check with my template. That seems pretty good so far. I didn't expect to run out of sheets, but I needed to use some off-cut material to take care of this last corner. I followed the same steps that I've already highlighted, and that basically completes our perimeter cuts. Progress so far is going great. Now it's time to cut out the opening for the drain. I added some water to the surface of the tiles that we're cutting before I used my angle grinder with the same diamond disc to make these cuts. The water helped keep the dust down. I also think it helped the temperature stay lower because I didn't have any small pieces crack on me.
That's the reason you have a wet saw. I'm just saying.
I used a razor blade to separate just a couple of individual stones that are overlapping with the drain, and I made sure to be really careful to keep my fingers away from the blade while I made these cuts.
Yeah, okay. Well, with the backer board there, yes, because the blade would grab your finger and it would slide under the backer board and it would be not a good day. But overall, that blade will not cut your finger. It will not cut hamburger meat or chicken or anything like that. It's meant specifically for a very rigid type of product. So yeah, your fingers are safe there, just not with the backer board.
And so far, my square cutout is looking pretty square. One final check, and our drain is pretty much spot on. This looks really good to me, but I don't know what our margin for error actually is. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a dry run, laying these pieces out on the shower floor, and that'll let me know if I need to make any more adjustments. My perimeter pieces were a killer fit. I just had to make a couple alterations to those small individual stones I had already cut. And with that, it's time to move on to installation. To attach our tile to the mortar bed, I'm gonna be using pretty standard thin set mortar. The only difference is this is white colored, and that's because I'll be following this up with white grout. Be sure to follow the mixing instructions on the bag. I was going for a thick pancake batter, and with thin set, once it's mixed, you'll let it set for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then mix it one more time before it's ready to use. All right, it's game time. I'll be using a 1/4 inch square notch trowel and these wedge spacers around the perimeter. Wish me luck. The first thing I did is use the flat side of my trowel to spread thin set over where my first row of tile is going to be. And once it's spread, I'll then use my square notches to create these grooves in the mortar. This will give the thin set room to squeeze and level as the tile gets placed. You don't want to just butt this first piece up to the corner. You want to use these spacers to make sure there's a little bit of gap that allows for a little bit of wiggle room as you install these pieces.
Okay, so yeah, you could have a little bit of gap though. So let me talk about this because I talked about it on, I think, the second video of this series that I'm doing on the critique, where he left his backer board up off of his shower pan about what he said, 1/8 of an inch. And I said on that video, he's going to fill that in later on. Not that he wants to, but he has to. There's just no way you could take 1/8 of an inch gap along the perimeter of that wall and not fill it in. And this is the point where he's filling it in. So if you followed me on that second video that I made, last video was the third. If you followed me on that, where I said he's going to fill in that gap, this is where he's doing it. So even if the pan was setting on top of the floor, which he did not do, it would have the same result. He's doing a water in, water out system with the shower pan. Only the walls and the curb are waterproof, which means now that he's filled in that gap, he is literally buried that 1/8 of an inch gap that he had there with thin set, which now makes that whole water pan able to soak up, wick up through his mortar bed into his thin set and thereby into his backer board. On all 3 walls and including the curb. And it's going to wick up into the curb and over the curb and out to his exterior floor. And that's why I said on the last video, the screenshot is this pan is going to fail, because it will. And it's going to take a long time. It's probably going to be you know, 5 years, 8 years down the road, but at some point there's going to be outside water getting through the tile that he's placed on the outside of that floor because of the wicking action that he's causing by doing this part. Well, strike that from the second part, because when he did the backer board. So that's what I'm getting on him mostly about this video, is that there's no way you cannot have wicking going on with a water in, water out system. And then, so to be fair, if he had actually taken that red guard at the bottom of his backer board and red guard at the bottom, then yes, it's probably innocuous that he's squeezing that 1/8 of an inch gap full of thin set. But right now, never saw it. In fact, just the opposite. He had put tape on the bottom of the backer board when he was trying to protect the floor, when he had done, what was he doing? I think he was doing the red guard. So anyway, yeah, enough of my diatribe, but I'm just saying this is as bad as it gets as far as like mixing methods, not materials. Mixing materials is okay. I do it all the time, but mixing your method is not a good idea.
And just a quick reminder, I'm not using spacers between my tile sheets, but make sure to use 1/8 inch or 16th inch spacers if your tile requires it, or you just want that look. Row 2, here we go. I'm gonna try and lay these as flat as I can get it, and then plop it and give it a wiggle. You want to press down a little bit, but not a lot, because you don't want a ton of squeeze out. That'll cause a lot of cleanup later. And here I'm using cardboard, but you could also use...
Okay, you don't want a ton of squeeze out. So when you take your trowel, it should be like at a very, not even flat angle, but it shouldn't be standing straight up, and it should be like at a 45 or something like that. So when you're taking your trowel, so that you have just enough thin set to cause the purpose. If you have enough thin set to squeeze out in between the individual pieces of tile, you put too much to begin with. I don't agree with what he's doing here, because he talked about, well, you could take cardboard and squeeze down all your tile down to the floor so you don't have any lippage, which is what we're doing with a float. But he's using the cardboard that comes with the tile, which is really, really flimsy. And so he's not going to get the same result that he would if he used a float. Ironically, he has a float, because in the next portion, he's going to be grouting all this stuff. So I don't know why he would tell people to use a piece of cardboard.
A grout float to press down and make sure all of your tiles are level with each other. Of course, everything is sloping towards the drain, but we just down a little bit, but not a lot, because you don't want a ton of squeeze out. That'll cause a lot of cleanup later. And here I'm using cardboard, but you could also use a grout float to press down and make sure all of your tiles are level with each other. Of course, everything is sloping towards the drain, but we just want to make sure that we don't have any stones popping up. And here we're at our final row, and if our template is successful, all of these pieces should go down with no problems. And I'm gonna tamp all these down, and this helps me feel if I've got any stones that are high. So as you can see, our template worked great for the perimeter. Now we just got a few individual stones around the drain, and those went down with no problem as well. I'm really glad I went with this template method. I was able to cut everything in one go and then install it all in one swoop.
Okay, so if you look at that, especially that brownstone that's sitting on the top of the drain, the way we're looking at it, he talked about doing this earlier in the video. He talked about that he's going to have his floor tile proud of the drain, which is great. I do that all the time. But the mistake that he made, what he should have done, is taken those individual tile and done a little taper cut on each one of those tile the way that I do. Not only does it allow, well, the reason that I raise my tile above the edge of the drain is because I want that positive water flow to go down into the drain. I think it's better to have that than possible pooling if you were to make your tile flush with the drain. So it's my little weirdness that I just like it sitting on top. Having said that, every tile that you cut around a drain, no matter what it is going to have a little edge to it right there because it's above the drain. It bothers me a lot that he didn't take the extra time to taper those little pieces of stone, which arguably aren't really stone, but even if they were stone, that's what I do. I taper those. I don't like this. And now I want to clean this thin set off the face of the tile before it dries. I keep forgetting how cool this stone floor is going to look when it's wet. The color really pops a ton. This needs to cure for 24 hours and then we'll be back to grout. It is now time for grout. I'm using this product called Prism. Yes, I've been using Prism now for, good part of 10 years, at least 8 years, 10 years. The reason I like Prism, Charlie over at the Tile House, local tile place that I go to, had recommended it to me because I was doing my first, was it 10 years ago? No, it must have been longer than that, 12 years ago. My very first stone type of shower pan. Literally, they were rocks that had anywhere from a 3/4 of an inch to half an inch to, it was all discombobulated. And I said to Charlie, I don't feel comfortable, like even with sanded grout, just doing this. And he's like, oh, we got Prism. Prism you can do on any size, right? So if your line is 1/16 of an inch, or if it's half an inch, it doesn't matter, 3/4 of an inch. So Prism won't crack. It will still have that property of that I'm used to with sanded grout, because it's got silica in it. It's also not the gritty type of stuff that you would be used to, that you would be scared to put on, say, marble or something that would scratch. Because the silica, as long as you don't press really hard on the float, the silica won't scratch the way sand does. So there's a lot of things. And then supposedly it has a self sealer built into it. I still recommend sealing regardless. But it's just an awesome grout as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, it's a good choice.
That's because it's good for tile butt joints all the way up to a 1/2 inch. I'll mix this up and give it 5 minutes, kind of like how I did the thin set earlier. You can get unsanded grout, but typically that's for small joints like up to 1/8 of an inch. So you'll notice that any other grout is pretty sandy like this.
No. So what he's telling you is wrong. He's using Prism grout. And what I just said, 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch, it wouldn't matter what your size is with Prism grout. Unsanded grout, I haven't touched since Charlie introduced me to this. Why? I don't even know why he's mentioning unsanded grout. It just doesn't have a purpose anymore.
You spread everything with a grout float. It's basically this thick rubber foam material
that you should have used to press down your mosaic tile.
with a trowel handle. And this basically pushes the material into all of the cracks around your tile, and it also squeegees the face of the tile to get it cleaned. I meant to use this during the installation to help press all the tiles down. I just couldn't find it.
So to be fair, even if getting back to what I said, and I hate to harp on this, but I have to, because that wicking action is real. So even if he, for some miracle, didn't squeeze his thin set into that 1/8 of an inch crack, now he has squeezed grout into it. Either which way, it's a porous material that'll make sure that wicking action happens. So I'm just saying.
Important thing is to work the grout float in every direction to get it pushed into those grout lines, especially on irregular shaped tiles like these. That looks awesome. And now I'll use a wet sponge to clean the grout off the surface of these tiles. I'll wipe in a circular motion, and you can see how it's cleaning already. Just don't press down too hard. And then I'll wash my sponge in one bucket, which will be my dirty water. And then after I wring it out, I'll load it up with clean water. And
wear gloves.
Go through less water overall.
Wear rubber gloves.
Cleaning grout is the definition of rinse and repeat. You just want to do a gradual cleaning. With each pass, it'll get cleaner and continue to look better. And for the tile that I'm using, I want a little bit of a recess in my grout lines, but you don't necessarily have to do that. The directions say to let this sit for 3 hours and come back with the cheesecloth to remove any haze on the surface of the tile.
I am not one of those direction readers, and that he read the directions and it talks about cheesecloth. Okay, there's a lot of tile guys out there that have a whole bag of cheesecloth they use incessantly all the time. I've never had a problem after grout using to get off the haze, the excess haze and all that stuff, a raggedy t-shirt. I have enough raggedy t-shirts that I don't wear anymore, and I just have a few in my truck. So a t-shirt, something, a soft cloth, a diaper, if you're not using diapers anymore, your kid is grown, a diaper would be great and all this stuff. If you want to buy a cheesecloth, okay, small potatoes, but I just had to mention. I bought this big roll last time I was at Home Depot, and it should last for quite a while. There's also another good opportunity to do a once over on every tile to make sure you don't have any thin set on the face of any of them. If you do, you can use a clean chisel to scrape it off, or a razor blade as well. Here I'm using an old Harbor Freight chisel to clean. Yeah, use the end of a Harbor Freight chisel to clean off all the excess grout that was inside his stainless steel drain, which he's scratching with the chisel. Well, probably not, but I'm just saying there are easier ways to do that. Clean out the recess for my drain before screwing it back in. I also used it to get a good reveal on my grout line. A razor knife would kick in at this point. I don't know this big old chisel why he would try doing that, but okay. Around the perimeter of the drain. And we are done. At this point, if you want or are required to, you can apply sealer to your grout and tile. Okay, so here's a good screenshot. I'm putting on my glasses. Here's a good screenshot, and you see what I'm talking about. All his tile from the bottom, that little compound cut that he has at the bottom there, all the way up around, you can see clearly where each one of those tile are proud of the drain, but yet has a little edge. That left side, the compound, the left side and the right side bottom, both have compound cuts, and both of them have what he calls a reveal, that it's not going to cut your foot, but you could stub your toe. I don't know. Like I said, he should have taken extra time to each one of these tile made a little taper cut. It would have been a cleaner look, and it would have been less intrusive when you're actually taking a shower. Other thing he said was that he likes the wet look. So he talked about not sealing. I don't know if I missed that part or I ever went through that. So yeah, getting back to Prism Grout. Prism Grout says that, yeah, sealer is not needed. We already have sealer in it, but I don't trust that. So there would still be a need for the sealer because the sealer is not a waterproofer. People get that mixed up sometimes. A sealer is not a waterproofer. It seals your grout and arguably some tile, especially this tile, from getting stained. So if you had some burgundy wine in the shower, oops, I spilled it, whatever, hair dye, hair dye is one of many chemicals that women use. And so, yes, you don't want to stain your grout or your tile. So yes, you definitely want to seal this tile. There are two different types of sealers. One of them is called an enhancer. If it says enhancer on the sealer, it will give you that wet look that he's talking about. When those pebble tile are all wet, it gives you that wet look. If it doesn't say enhancer, it's just going to give you that wet look until it dries, and then it'll go away. That wet look will go away. So he should have talked about that too, because it matters since he's talking about keeping that wet look, which is why I mentioned it. Hold on, let me back up, see if he mentioned it.
And we are done.
Hold on.
At this point,
Whoa, hold on. What's going on? Okay, hold on. I got it.
really have to do that. I bought this big roll last time I was use a clean chisel to scrape it off, or a razor blade as well. Here I'm using an old Harbor Freight chisel to clean out the recess for my drain before screwing it back in. I also used it to get a good reveal on my grout line around the perimeter of the drain. And we are done. At this point, if you want or are required to, you could apply sealer to your grout and tile, but I don't need to, and I want to keep that wet, dry difference in look, so I'm leaving it right here.
No. Another thing I want to talk about sealer, what I said already, not to be redundant if I mentioned it already, sorry. The sealer is not just for your grout, but it's also for your tile. And in this case, this is very, very, very porous. Did I say porous? Porous, capital P, very porous tile. All of this is a sponge. This entire shower floor is a sponge for water. So not sealing any of that stuff is wrong. When he's saying, oh, I don't need to seal it, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. Because all I have to do, like I said, a glass of burgundy wine spilled in there, everything is ruined. Like you would, the remediation for that would be ridiculous. So yes, definitely seal that. Another thing I want to mention, and we're going to get onto it probably in the next video. He is doing a water in, water out system. Have I mentioned that? It really bothers me that he never sealed the surface of the pan. And I went through that in video 2, I think it was. He never sealed the surface of the pan. So all the water that he has is going to go directly into that pan through the tile and through the grout and into the mortar. And if you got the Brady Bunch living there where there's 3 or 4 showers a day, that pan is saturated all the time, despite and regardless that he put a pre-slope there. And I think he did put a pre-slope. But then he clogged all the holes with little pebbles. So there's that too. I think that was on video 1. Anyway, let me see what.
In next episode, we're going to be tiling the wall. Hey everybody, my name is Mike Montgomery, and today
blah 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 blah. So that's it. So that's what I want to say about that. As I said, there wasn't a whole lot of critique. The tiling part, like I said, is relatively easy. It's hard to go wrong with so many videos out on YouTube to screw up the tiling part. And at the end of the day, it's all aesthetic. This is a floor covering. He's going to do wall coverings next and all that stuff. So it's kind of like wallpaper or anything else, to where the look matters more than the practical part of it. As I said from third video, your entire shower should be functional. By the time you're done with the prep, before one tile is set, your entire shower is functional. with all your red guard or with you flow effects drain or this or that, whatever. Doesn't matter what you use to make it the whole thing monolithic. Like the whole thing should be just like, oh, I have a shower now, even though it's red or blue or aqua, whichever waterproofer you decide. The tile is incidental, arguably, but the tile part is not what I'm taking issue with. Am I going to go on to the next video and talk about his wall tile? Yes, a little bit, just slightly. It'll be a shorter video, I promise. I promise it'll be a shorter video, but I really wanted to emphasize his floor. The reason why is because every tiler knows, and I know through the last 24, 25 years of doing this, that all your failures happen ankle below. So you have to remediate everything from ankle below, and he did not. And that bothers me a lot. And that's why I came on to him about this floor tile. This floor tile, plus all the grout, plus the thin set, that's all stuck up under the 1/8 of an inch gap. Like I said, he's got a failure happening. It's in the works. And I don't mean a failure like the shower is going to fall apart. What I mean is he's on a situation where he's allowing wicking action to happen because of the wallboard. Not because of the wallboard. Strike that. If he had put his wallboard directly inside the mortar, I don't have a problem with that as long as he sealed everything up the wall and down onto the floor. I would never put my wallboard in there, but if he did, no problem. But he ostensibly put it right on top of the pan, which is going to allow water to wick into the wallboard. And therefore, everywhere, especially the curb, is going to go up and over onto the floor. That's why I made the video. That's why I made this video on his floor, because he's guaranteed a problem. Anyway, I'm going to talk about his tiling ability on his extra large format tile. Oddly enough, this is 3 months after he started this project, and there's still not a finished video yet. So if there's a finished video so you can see what it looks like, I think it looks like garbage because of the type of wall tile that he's going to use, but that's just my opinion, and you will see that later on. Well, you'll see it on the next video. So that's it. That's all I want to talk about until the next one comes along. And I'll probably have less to say about the walls, really, honestly, I promise. Hey, if you enjoyed that video and you learned something, consider being a Patreon member. $5, $10, $15 a month would help me greatly produce more videos. I make nothing from YouTube at all. If you're going to call me for advice, please donate $50 for 30 minutes. My link to my PayPal and my Patreon account is down below. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell so you get immediate notifications as soon as I post videos. And thank you very much for your support.